it manifested in like health anxiety, which I'd never really had before.
They're working so much, but then the quality of their work isn't up to that standard that they're used to, and that causes even more anxiety and worry because they can't do the work to the quality and level that they want to do.
Like, you downplay that just ability to turn off emotion, turn on logic. Most people in the world can't do that. That's why so many bad things happen in the world, but you don't. I remember you used a term with me one, you like studied like being a stoic. I think that was the term. Like, is that how you are just day to day as well? Welcome to another Agency Founders podcast episode. Today we are going to go quite deep, aren't we? We're going to get quite deep. Do you want to introduce the topic today?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about mental health for agency founders. So from a personal perspective, so we'll share our stories and our experience of going through it ourselves, and then also just as important is how you then coach and support your staff through mental health challenges, because I think everybody's aware that definitely during like the COVID period, there's a big spike in mental health challenges, and equally a lot more people are talking about it now, which is very good. So here we go.
Yep, get a cup of tea, get a coffee or a wine, depending on what time it is you listen to this. And hopefully this episode gives you some insights into kind of how this should be approached, especially as you scale your agency.
Okay, I'm going to start right at the start. So when we first started the business, this was, again, when we first went full-time on the business, so like January 2019, I think this was the point where you had your first mental health challenges. And I think you're definitely the first person I'd known that actually acknowledged, I've got mental health challenges now, I'm going to see a therapist. And I think even it just shows how much this whole topic's evolved in the last 5 years or so. Because I remember at the time, like I said, I obviously know a lot of people, friends and all of certain ages, but you were the first person that ever actually said that I knew of in my circle. And then I remember my perception at the time was, are you up for running the business? And like obviously that, like those stigmas and those negatives that go with mental health that I thought of at the time. And then looking back now, I'm just like, I'm so much more knowledgeable and aware of this topic that I would never think that these days. So in terms of like your experience at that time, go for it. What was going through your mind?
I think it was almost like what wasn't going through my mind when I think back to that initial bit, because it was like there was so much going on. I feel like those were the days when me and you were working insane hours. We had so much on our plate. There was a lot of pressure. There were so many things we were figuring out. There was like so many like challenges around like HMRC, companies, all these things that I was like, so they seemed so big. And you'll remember for me, like I found these things really big at the time, like when we first started this, because I didn't understand it. And everyone makes it such like a scary big, like you need to register this and do this, and you're like, what does that mean? I think there was so much going on that I think, I remember it got to, so I went full time on the business in April 2018. You went full time January 2019. And I think around March 2019 is when it properly hit me, because I think that was then 12 months of just solid stress, work, adrenaline. I was working late into the night, had calls early morning. And I remember it just got to a point where I think like, it was like, I can't remember how it started coming out. I think it started coming out because I was obsessing over like the weirdest of things in my own personal life. So I'd be obsessed about like, I remember like, I think it manifested in like health anxiety, which I'd never really had before. I remember looking in the mirror being like doing this a lot of the time. If you can't see, it's like I just touching my neck and like near my Adam's apple all the time, like I can feel lumps. And then you like see a video, then you Google, you go down that rabbit hole and it just makes it worse. And I remember thinking like, why am I doing this now? I've never done this before, so something must be wrong. Like, I want to go to a doctor. Went to a doctor, they were like, there's nothing. Didn't trust the doctor. I went to see another doctor, paid private to go see another doctor. So it was like I was in denial that the doctors who are experts in this, I was basically saying that they were wrong. And I think then it got to a point where like, it was like, I remember it was like April 2019. And like, I just went for like with my family. And like my nephew at the time, my first nephew, he was like 2, 3. And we were just on the beach. And there was like the tide had gone out. And I was just with my family, lovely day out in Norfolk over the weekend, see them, lovely sunny day. I just remember just standing on the beach. He was running towards me, and I literally just broke down in tears, and that's never happened before. And I was blubbering, like, you know, like the kid blubber that you have, like where you just like, you can't like catch a breath. I've not cried like that since I must have been a kid. And I remember just thinking like, this isn't right. And like my sister was there. My nephew came over to me and he was sort of like being like, oh, what's wrong? And I was like, I don't know how to explain this to a 2-year-old. And then my family, they like, obviously they were there and they were really supportive. But I think that for me was like a clear sign that I'd pushed my limit a bit too far. I now need to find a way to not necessarily slow it down, but find a way to manage it better. And then naturally, obviously, the first thing people always say is you should speak to someone. So that's just what I did. Found a therapist in London, had 6 initial sessions. And I remember sort of telling you, I remember my thought process about telling you about it, because I think there was a part of me which was like, he's going to see this as, God, he's too young to run this business. Why have I gone into this with him? Is he made for this? Which you've kind of admitted did cross your mind. And I remember thinking like, such a shame. But then I was like, I can't not tell you this is happening, because I just feel like I might as well be honest from the outset. And if your response to that was, you're not made for the business, I don't want to do it, so be it. You weren't the person to go into business with me and it'll work out some other time. But I think you were just like, yeah, that's cool. Let me know if you need anything. And I think at that point I was like, I've got to get a handle on this and make it work. And see, I went through that process and you sort of come out the other side of it.
I think as well, at the time I didn't even know how to support you either, because like I said, like it's such a different time of mental health back then. And I said I would never think that now, but back then definitely was thinking it. But I think for you, I always thought the perception was that for you, like the trigger point was, so March is when we rebranded, because with the threat of a legal action from another agency, and we hired the first 2 employees. Like, was it the trigger of those that put you over the edge, or was it just a case of the longevity of, like you said, like nearly 12 months of working with probably not even a break?
I think there's a couple. So we hired someone to do a specific role at the agency. I think she was like our 3rd hire, and we were just like, this isn't working. I think literally after 4 weeks, we were like, we're not even going to wait till probation. And I remember taking her for a walk and just being like, this isn't working out, I'm really sorry. And she was really obviously naturally upset, and it all ended up fine. But I think that was the first time where I kind of felt like, not that I'm playing with people's lives, but we're running something here and I'm having to make these decisions. Am I cut out for this? I think that combined with, naturally the pressures that we had, obviously with like new hires, with the pressures of, I think just the business was scaling so quickly. I had a million things to do. I think it just compounded. I don't even think there was like a specific trigger. I think all of that just compounded, and it got to a point where I was like, God, I don't think my mind is like going a million miles an hour. So then I tried to fill that with, rather than actually be like, right, let me get a hold of this, I just filled it by being more busy. So I just do more and I'd work later, because I just didn't like sitting in like silence. And I think that then just eventually, a weekend where I could relaxed on a beach with my family, no stress, couple of drinks, I think that for me was like just the catalyst, where it was like, I've stopped, and it just all came flooding out. And I realized like, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah. See, a lot of people do that, to be fair, like agency founders specifically, where like they mask it with work, and then they're working so much, but then the quality of their work isn't up to that standard that they're used to. And then that causes even more anxiety and worry, because they can't do the work to the quality and level that they want to do.
Yeah.
And that just makes the whole thing even worse.
Yeah.
In terms of in terms of like that, like you said about the hiring staff, I think that is such a big thing in terms of like, you hear all of these like agencies, but they're like one man, one woman bands. You're not really an agency then, you're more like a freelancer. And like at the time, like we glorified freelancing, masking as an agency. We were always going to build an agency, but at the time it was just me and you, and if things failed, we'd just get another job or something. Like that's the mentality, and we made some cash anyway, so that was cool. But then once you hire staff, that's when it's like, you've got to look after them. You've got next level responsibilities. You have to bring in even more business to then cover their costs. You've got to be a leader. You've got to do all of this stuff. You've got to understand about HR, and it's just a different level, isn't it?
That first like year and a half, so like we're talking that time frame up to sort of my breakdown in April 2019. How did you cope with it? How did you process? Because obviously I know, people listening to this might not even know who we are, but like me and you, obviously I know how you process things. We're very different in the way that we think, process things. It's what makes us really good at certain things and not so great at certain things, and why we complemented each other. But like, how did you process that year and a half? So like for me, obviously it compounded. I worked too much. I realized this isn't good. But that didn't really happen to you. So how did you process the pressures of hiring, with scaling business, you leaving your job, like stable job that was well paid, to do this thing with a guy who you hired from uni a few years before that? Like, there must have been stuff going on in your head where you're like, is this the right call? But you kind of just processed it well. Like, what went through your head? How did you cope with it?
Logic as usual. I
Yeah.
think it's like, what would the alternative be? So like, I'd mapped out my career in my head, and I was like, that's not what I want. It's like, it doesn't appeal to me. So the alternative is to do this. If it fails, I don't care. I was confident enough at that time that I could just get another job anyway. So I didn't have worries on that side of things. At the time, I just found it quite fun. I think I was obviously moving house, getting a flat and a mortgage. Then the freelancing agency at the time helped fuel that. And then it just kind of snowballed and escalated. And I just found the whole thing quite fun. I knew what I wanted because, I think as soon as I went full time on it in January, I think I did like a 1 week of work solid on it. And I was just like, I can't do this. I don't want to be a freelancer full time. I have to build and scale it. So if you make that decision, then the next natural step is to hire people. And I don't know if I always found people the more rewarding side of things. So I just kind of gravitated towards that. And I've always been a numbers person, and agencies are like a numbers game, aren't they? Just like, you just got to cover the margins, the costs, and so it's like, we're getting to mine in a bit, but mine was like the end of that year is when everything hit me. So maybe subconsciously it might have been starting something which I just wasn't aware of.
But I feel like, I don't know, like people listening to this, I feel like you downplay that a lot because you just feel like that's just how I am. I feel like you downplay that just ability to turn off emotion, turn on logic. Most people in the world can't do that. That's why so many bad things happen in the world, because people let emotion overpower logic. But you don't. I remember you used a term with me once. I think it was like off the cuff, but I think you like said you like studied like being a stoic. I think that was the term. And I think you said like you read a lot about it when you were younger, like being a stoic. And obviously stoic is kind of like you literally are just logic based. Like, talk me through that. Like, is that how you are just day to day as well?
So it's different because that was what I was naturally anyway. And then somebody did that comment to me, like, oh, I was reading about stoicism. You thought you came across like that,
right? Okay.
To me, and I was like, I've never heard of that before. I don't know. But then when I read about it, I was like, Christ, this is almost how I've been subconsciously living my life for a long time. It is weird. I think I've told you before, but it was when I was young. So I was a teenager, and my gran was just moaning to my mother about something. And then obviously when you're a teenager, you're full of emotions, and it was something around me and my friends, and like just excited around the house and stuff. So then when I heard that, I was kind of like, well, fine, when I'm around her, I'm just going to control myself and restrain from excitement. And that was like the first starting point of it all. It's very strange, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
it
how
is,
it's so
but
prominent in my brain.
does it affect like other parts? So obviously it's really good in times like with the business. So obviously you never let yourself get to a point of like that burnout. Obviously you'll get to it in a minute where it did happen, but like you're very good at controlling that bit. But is that the same for every emotion then? Like even in just day-to-day life, like do you feel like the way you process excitement or nerves, like going on holiday, for example, do you process that as like, I'm just going to think logically about going on holiday, or can you actually be like, I'm buzzing, I can barely sleep tonight because I'm going on holiday? Like, how does it affect like other parts of your life? Because I think that's the part I find fascinating, is like, surely if you're going to be really calm, like level-headed at work, you must be like that in life.
Yeah. Well, I think like, so when you do actually then read about stoicism, like their whole thing is, you never, like if you have the emotions of like 10 being super excited, 3 being really low, you never have 10 out of 10s, and you never have the below 5s. You just continuously 7, 8, 9 out of 10s. Well, it sounds not dull in real life. Like you're still excited and stuff, but you don't allow yourself to be controlled by emotions.
So you feel passionate about things.
Yeah, but in a different way. So it's not externalized, it's internalized. So that comes out in a different way. Which is more like drive and determination and less externalized.
Yeah.
I mean, perfect example. Yesterday when lost my dog for a bit, so then the whole time, like you're about to get stressed. But I was like, if I get stressed now, I'm going to make the situation far worse. So I need to think logically on how to find the dog and what my steps are going to be. Because if I ring my wife up being all stressed about losing the dog, then that's going to set her off, and then it'll be 20 times worse.
It's interesting, isn't it? I love it. Okay.
Yeah, that's just a way I've lived my life for a very long time, and it kind of works.
I mean, that's the thing though. People like everyone always says, "Oh, I'm just searching for happiness," and really, kind of what I just put like that's not a thing. What happiness is when you just feel comfortable just being you, like being, and like even just the same with like running a company, running an agency. I feel like you have to just get comfortable with it being uncomfortable, and at that point, you've almost been a bit like, okay, there will be bad things that happen. There will be stressful times. There will be issues I need to fix, but it's just part and parcel of what I do. And I think that's what people are constantly searching for. And obviously, now I'm slowly starting to get better. I realise, but I think in those early days, I couldn't process that. It's like the uncertainty just killed me every day. It was like, I don't know if tomorrow we're going to have a business. That's how my head worked. I know in practice that would never happen, but how my head was like is, if we lose this client tomorrow, I've got no business, I've got no job, I failed, I'm a failure. And I think that's what was going through my head, which obviously contributed to that blubber fest on the beach I had.
Yeah, well, that's more rational, I'd say. So it's like, even now, if I just think, what's the worst case scenario? All of our clients leave and the business gets shut down, I'll just make another business or I'll go get another job. Like, obviously, we feel shit about it. But if I allow myself to think like that, then I could make bad decisions or...
Yeah, obviously, like if clients are listening, please don't leave. And obviously, and if you're in the team, please don't take what Sam said quite literally. There will be a business. But yeah, no, I agree.
So in your therapy, what was your outcome that you got from that? Like, what did you actually do, and how did it help you?
Those first 6 sessions I didn't particularly find very useful, and it kind of tarnished my perspective on counselling at the time. So I learned things you learn. I think I learned like the basics. So I learned, well, actually, how I'm feeling and how I'm thinking should be they're two different things. So I need to learn to separate them. That was interesting, but at the same time, I already knew that. I think then it was like working on techniques. So I think she tried to do like a meditation with me for a bit. And I think
I remember that actually. I think at one point you were popping off to the toilet every now and again and just doing a meditation.
Yeah, I literally popped to the bathroom like mid-work, just like, right, I've got Headspace app, 5 minutes, because it's something she said to do. I didn't find value in those things, but I kept trying persistently. I don't think it was the therapy that helped me initially in that time. I think it was just outside of it, I started doing things that helped me. So I'd exercise more. I went to the gym. Obviously, me and my partner got more stable because we actually started living together. We were in a long distance relationship for a bit. So I think like certain things just pieced together in my life, which almost worked. And then I had the understanding of, okay, I need to be more mindful of like just the way I'm thinking and feeling. So I was mindful of it, but I didn't particularly find it useful. It wasn't like I'd say, yeah, those 6 sessions like saved my life. I feel like even if I hadn't have had those, I think at that time I would have probably gone through it in the same way, if that makes sense. And I think that tarnished my view, obviously, until I had more counselling sort of years later.
So when you came out of those sessions, you weren't like, I'm healed and I know. Did you come out of it with coping mechanisms?
No coping mechanisms. No, I came out of it with like more awareness of how the brain works, but not really coping mechanisms. And that's why I tried the meditation. I tried religiously, like using Headspace, because I was like, I'm going to give this time, like 2-3 months. It just wasn't for me. So then it was like, okay, I just need to go and try and find my own ways of not even coping, but preventing, I think was my number one priority. So it's like, I don't want to just learn to cope with stuff. I need to learn to prevent letting myself get to a certain point. And that was the part I found more difficult. And we just didn't really touch on that in therapy.
Do you still think like that now?
What?
Prevent things happening rather than processing?
No. So now I can't prevent things. I know I can't. I think it's more just getting comfortable, like I mentioned, like just getting comfortable with things happening and just learning to deal with them better, which I feel like I'm getting much better at that now. But back then, I couldn't really deal with things. I'd let emotion like just take over. And I'd be like, I know, like I'd have like 2 things going on in my head. I'd be like, logically, I know this is what is going to likely happen and what I need to do. But then there's the other part of me, which at the time was a lot stronger, which I needed work on and which therapy couldn't help. That was more just a me thing, was I need to stop letting the emotions outweigh and sort of say, no, I don't know why you're looking at the logic. Everything's going to be ruined tomorrow. You're not going to have a business. You're going to be homeless tomorrow, mate. Okay. And I think that's the side of me where I was like, I need to learn to dampen that. And that came with time.
Did you do the Wheel of Life thing?
Yeah, we did the Wheel of Life. We did like the values. We did like, there were so many things that we did. And I just remember thinking like, this isn't what I need right now. So I look at it as like it's a scale. So it was like, I don't know, if you've got like 10, you're in crisis. 0 is I'm chill as like a pea on a beach. I was at crisis point, and I don't think when you're at crisis point is the time you need therapy. You need therapy when you're in that sort of like between 3 to 6 mark, because that's where you learn. You're open to learning. You're open to ideas. You can actually think about like coping mechanisms. When you're at crisis point, you want help now, and meditation doesn't help now. Talking, yes, helps, but not in the way that I was having with the therapist. I just felt like I couldn't open up. And in crisis point, I was like, I need to do something about this now. Whereas if I'd gone when I was like a 5, when, I don't know, before we hired, for example, let's just say, had I gone then, would the outcome been different? I don't know, maybe, but I won't know.
So what do you do when you're in crisis mode?
What do I do now when I'm in crisis mode?
Or one?
So my initial reaction always used to be, I need to action something. Now I just take myself out of the situation for a bit. So like techniques that I've learned, like splash your face with water, or go for a quick walk, or just do something that isn't related to the crisis or the problem for a few minutes. Because then it's like you're not immediately responding to it with emotion. You can actually just go away, think, what do I do next? Come back. That's kind of my initial step. And then I am quite action focused, and it'll be like, okay, what steps do I need to take now to not make this a crisis? And I'll do whatever I can in my control to do that. Whatever isn't in my control, I'm better at just accepting now isn't in my control, but I will try and speak or get involved people that could have control of it if they can. So if I need someone else to do something, obviously I'll chat to them. Or if it's something that genuinely is just out of anyone's control, I'll just do what I can do. And at that point, I think then I say, okay, have I done as much as I can? Have I responded as well as I can? And then I kind of, let's just see what the outcome is. But yeah, how I used to deal with it was not good. It was like action based. It was like just straight away, fight or flight. Like, God, like what is going on? Like, what are you doing? I'd be very aggressive about it to myself. I'd be aggressive about it to other people. And that's just not what I wanted to be.
No. And then in hindsight, do you think it was the therapist that was, because last year I was reading about it where I completely wasn't aware of, just like, and I think BetterHelp do a lot more of it now, where they say like if you don't gel with your therapist after like session 1 or 2, like get a new one. It's not a bad thing. Like the goal is to find a therapy that matches to you. In hindsight, was it right for you, like that therapist?
No, definitely not. And I think honestly, just like time really helped, and I was very lucky. I had a really good support network of like family, friends, my partner. Like everyone understood, and I was open with them, and that helped me more, I think, than a therapist. But like, I think just time with running the business. I think we were so fresh and new to it, and I was so young, and just thinking about it, I was like, I don't know anything that's going on here. I feel so out of control, out of my depth. My natural reaction is I want to keep on to this because I love it so much. I'm just going to emotionally respond to it. Like, we're building something crazy. We were growing so quickly. Like, we became a £1 million company, not overnight, but it felt like it was overnight in my head. And that, as a 23-year-old, I feel like it doesn't happen often. And when it does happen, people make such a big deal out of it. It's like, oh, I was this like 20-year-old millionaire. They make a big deal out of it. And there's a reason people make a big deal out of it, is because I think it just doesn't happen often. But I think everyone must feel a certain way, because you just don't have the life experience. You don't have the work experience. There's so much going on where you're just like, I've set up this business and it's doing really well, and I'm obviously capable of doing it, but I don't know how to manage all of the other factors that come with business. And I think now, with time, you just get better at it. You learn to be like, well, this is what it is, or have I done what I can control, and just stuff like that, I think. So yeah, I didn't gel with my therapist that first one, and then I had another one. We kind of gelled, but honestly, just time and just other things that I've done myself have helped me more.
That first one was face to face, right?
Yeah.
I haven't done it face to face.
Yeah, both. So I've had 2 therapists over the last 5 years. Both of them have been face to face because I just couldn't do it any other way.
Do you diagnose yours as anxiety then?
Yeah,
Is
it's
that the root of it?
yeah, it's like generalized anxiety.
I think mine's more. I was never officially diagnosed, but I think it's more towards depression side of things, like mild depression. I think.
Did you have the score thing done? You know, where they score you based on either anxiety or depression. So they ask you questions, then they'll give you a score, and that basically tells people or the therapist if you're depressed or anxious.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting. I think you can probably do it online. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but it's just like you just answer a load of questions. Also, maybe not now because you're probably happy now. But like if it happens again, it's quite useful to know. And then obviously mine was like resounding anxiety.
Because I never actually got diagnosed with it. And it was I wasn't even looking for a diagnosis. It was more trying to figure out what is going on. And then mine was triggered. So it started. The work side of things was, when we hired the senior, Dan and Olivia, like 2 very senior people. I think I put a lot of pressure on myself when that happened because it was more. They were already coming from bigger companies, so I felt a lot more pressure to like perceive our company as a bigger company than what it actually was, rather than just being like, you're joining a startup, get used to it. We're just trying to like mask it that we were a bit more grown up. And then we had a few issues with the office. Do you remember where we just like we're paying for this fucking expensive office, and then the aircon was broken, and then the first few days, and they had like they're all still wearing their coats, and it was just like it felt like a joke of a business. And then that side was okay. And then obviously it was more personal then. So it's like, obviously my uncle killed himself around that time. So this all happened in like the end of that year. And each of these individual things, I kind of processed them fine. And then another one was, we just had a puppy, and then Jess, my wife, went away to Australia with work for, I think it was 10 days, I think. So then I was looking after the puppy by myself. Which again, like that on its own is fine, but then when you put all of this together in like a short period of time, but it's just, the whole period was just like a blur of that time, and then it didn't actually hit me until midway through the next year, because then you go into that next year, and that's when COVID hit in March. So at that point, we were up to 8 people, I think. So then COVID hit, and then obviously that's like COVID throws everything off. And then, so I think it was around that time was when I eventually just like broke down with Jess. And for me, it was like, I think we were saying about emotions earlier, and it's like, that's probably the downside of it was you can control emotions fine, but it's the other side of not vocalizing it and externalizing things. So like, I tried some of those meditation stuff as well, because it was obviously a big craze at one point, those apps.
Yeah.
And then talking to the therapist afterwards, like she was just explaining that I wasn't really doing it right. So it's like there was like an app on there, and it was like the clouds come in, you just kind of push them away, so your thoughts are like very clear. So I took that as a technique that like anything that you were thinking of, you just like brush it away to keep your mind clear. But then obviously you're not tackling the root cause of the problem, so then you just keep pushing stuff away, and then that just builds up somewhere, and then eventually it comes down and hits you. So that part I just didn't. That's why I've never really taken to the meditation apps. And equally, I don't really like the pressure of like some people try and do it religiously every day, and I just don't really like the pressure of doing that to yourself. So all of that period, and then I wasn't feeling good. I think waking up every day and you just depressed and just thinking like, what's the point? Why are we doing this? Even though you knew you had like running a business, you got a wife and just got a mortgage in London, you're like essentially almost like living the dream if you fast forwarded it 10 years. But that's why I don't know, you're just off. And actually it took alcohol for me to actually open up and break down, which is like I just had a few whiskeys and then just told Jess about it. And as soon as you open up, that's when it's just like you've externalized it. You're almost like accountable then to actually sort shit out. And so then that's why I got a therapist. And again, that therapist was okay. We did the Wheel of Life, which is all right. Kind of helped me to like prioritize things. But it's more just, getting things off my chest and externalizing stuff, which helped in the short term. But it wasn't until maybe a few months later, I got a life coach, and that was very different because that was a lot more like processing how you think, how you approach life, potentially longer term planning, but just like talking things through. That helped so much more than just therapy of just trying to like diagnose something and then go through some theoretical things and then just move on. Whereas this was actually just talking about life with somebody who I just probably just never really don't really talk to my parents. I don't really like not like I don't really talk to my parents about big life stuff. I do talk to my
Just
parents.
dad calling, go
Yeah.
away.
I just don't really talk to them about like big life stuff.
Yeah.
So I've never really spoken to anybody about that. So I found that way more helpful than therapy. And I probably will go back to him eventually. But yeah, that whole period. And then later on, I then did that first aid, mental health first aid. And the thing I learned on there that I always remember is like with mental health, it's like the funnel, where it's like you're going around the funnel at the top throughout life. Little things hit you and you drop down the funnel, and then you have, I don't know, you go for a walk, you take a break, you have your weekend, that moves you back to the top of the funnel. So everyday normal thing life can move you up the funnel, but sometimes you just take a hit and you keep going down and you can't get yourself back up, and that's where you need either support of friends or something more professional like therapy. And that, I think, yeah, that's always stuck with me afterwards, after I'd done the first aid.
Yeah, I didn't even like know at the time like that life coaches were a thing. I remember, and obviously we now know quite a few different life coaches if we ever need to, which we can just intro or rely on. But I just never even knew about it. Like I didn't even know it was a thing. So naturally, you default to therapy, counselling.
Yeah, so I got it from, remember that app that we had during COVID? What was it called?
Oh yeah, it was was it the coins one?
Yeah,
Care
coins. And then as part of that, you'd use it towards another third party thing.
Yeah.
And then, so you have a call with like an independent person, you explain everything. And then she referred me to different people. So this was the point where I'd done the therapy and I still didn't feel perfect and right. So you're almost like a year on from all those situations. And I spoke to somebody, because as soon as she heard my thing, she just gravitated to the uncle suicide thing. So it's like, oh, you're still grieving. And I was like, I don't actually think I am. So then she referred me to somebody else around this topic. And we went through all of that with them. And then she was like, yeah, I don't think this is to do with the grief. I think it's just wider, multiple different things that you just need to tackle and assess and talk it through. So then she introduced me to a life coach. And I was like, never heard of these people, but sounds good.
How did that period of like a few months, so from that November-ish 2019 to like sort of like June 2020 when we were still in the height of lockdown-ish, but it was that summer, so like that period of time, how did you see it like affect you like as an agency owner, like running a company, like at work? Like did you see any like certain things that you started doing and we were just like, this isn't how I even want to just operate in the company?
It's just a blur.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like none. I don't know if your brain subconsciously does it to filter it out or not, but there's nothing specific there. I journal a lot now, and there's nothing you can specifically pinpoint that was going on then. That's all I remember was, I think if anything, work helped because obviously like the world was going to shit and nobody knew what was going on, whereas we had this vehicle that we could just focus on and take our attention away from it. So I think work did help in that sense. Yeah, just all a blur, that whole period up until the end of that summer, I'd say.
So you mentioned just then you obviously did a mental health first aid course. Do you want to just talk through a bit more about that? Because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that probably have heard about it, don't know what it entails. Things would be good to cover, I guess, like why did you do it? How did it go? What was it like? And then why would a founder, I think what a question might be then is like, why would someone go to a founder of a company if they need mental health support? Like, is there like a stigma there? I don't want to talk to them. Why did you want to do it? Like, how's it been since?
So I think the main reason I wanted to do it, obviously, because of all the experiences that I had and you had as well, like I wanted to educate myself about it. But it was more, we started having some big issues with staff with their mental health. So I was I wanted to understand how you talk to people about it, because I'd heard contradicting things around like you obviously want to ask them questions about themselves, but then do you share your experiences? But a contrasting thing then is like you don't talk about it to yourself, about you. It's all about them. And then you eventually open it up to just be like, can I share something about my experience rather than just making it all about you, if that makes sense? Because apparently, like, yeah, that's, you avoid doing that. So as I heard that, like contrasting views, like, right, I need to go do a bit of education around this. So I found that mental health first aid course, and yeah, it was good. It was good, like education awareness, especially what I mentioned earlier about that funnel. Like that's always stuck with me, so it's worth doing it for that. But because it's first aid, it's like it's a weird scenario. It's like it was intense. So it was like 3 days straight of these intense scenarios. And I remember like one morning was just like talking all about suicides for like 4 hours. And like even that, there's like things in there and like terminology. Like you can't say someone committed suicide because it's kind of like commitment is like, it's kind of like a legal thing that you've committed a crime. So it's like completed suicide is the term that you're meant to use. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it's like, but nobody does that in real life. So there's a lot of things around that, around like the correct terminology. But it was a lot more like specific crises in the workplace and how do you react to them. So if one of your member of staff is having a anxiety attack, how do you go about processing that? So it's like, it was interesting in that sense, but it's like the book was that thick and there's nothing that, if that did happen to me now in work, I can't remember those like things. You have to pull the manual out and like read it through. So it didn't really help in that sense. It just helped in terms of like terminology you should use, questions you should ask, and just like a wide education about it all.
So if I was right now, we're carrying on with this episode, and I start having an anxiety attack for whatever reason. I just start having one. What would you start asking me like in the moment?
I honestly wouldn't know. That's the thing about
Yeah.
it. It doesn't really help you in that because like if someone is in that such distress, you can't really process and think, oh, what was this course that I did X amount of years ago? It's just like your body goes into like reaction mode. I think, yeah, you're just asking them a lot more questions and just trying to like calm them down and trying to figure out like what is the root cause of the anxiety.
Yeah.
But yeah, just don't have this. That's why it wasn't that useful in a practical sense, but it's very good for myself in terms of like training. But yeah, it all came from like staff issues that we had. So like the first staff one we had was somebody in the company where they'd been to an event the night before, which was like a big SEO event in Brighton. So it's like lots of booze. A few of our members of staff went down, and then somebody sent, I think it was me and Dan, maybe you or somebody else, like an email about this person. And the way this person had written it was almost just like an obituary. And this person had given a very detailed plan to this person about how they wanted to kill themselves for a payout for their child. So it was like a very, very emotionally led situation that he'd thought through. And the way that person written that email and sent it to me and Dan or whoever was on the thread, I was just like, that hit me really hard. And I was just like, fuck.
I remember reading the email because I was in there as well, and I remember thinking like either this is like a scam. That's how I read it first. You know, it's like spam. It's like, what are you talking about? And then you read it a second time, and I was like, this is bad.
Yeah. And then I think Dan was at the conference, so he'd been out that night. I think Olivia had been out with the team. I think you might have been on annual leave, maybe. I can't remember what you were there. I think you must have been on annual leave because I was thinking at the time, like, fuck, I got out. Like, I'm the only one that can actually sort this out right now because everybody else is like not in the right headspace, and you weren't there. So then the aim was just trying to get him on a call and figure out like, is he okay? And I remember saying to Dan, like, yeah, we went into our system, got his emergency contact details, stored them in our phone in case anything happened. And then as soon as you get him on a call, like that was the worst period, is trying to make sure that he was okay and that we could get him on a call, and then just helping him through that situation. So it's like every single week having calls with him, making sure he's going to therapy, etc. That was intense. So after that, I was like, Christ, I need to get some kind of training or something on this. And then we had it again, do you remember, with another member of staff where she just had her own mental health issues, where it was just like she had this perception that everybody else was thinking she wasn't good enough. And then she had a big breakdown, so helping her through that. So there's a lot of like intense work for you as a founder? And that, I think COVID as well, like blurred the lines there. Do you remember like there was a lot of expectations on businesses to blur that line that they've never done before, of like personal lives, business lives, and during COVID, like that line just blurred, and it almost became this responsibility where businesses should be like paying for therapy and like doing all of this stuff for staff. Do you remember that?
Yeah. It was like a weird period of time because it was like, what perks have you got? What are you offering them for support at home? And it's like, we're also processing the fact that the country's in lockdown and people around us are getting ill and dying from this disease. And the pressure was put on us as employers and as founders of this company to be like, everyone's looking up at us for like guidance. Like, what are you going to offer? What can you do to help me? And I think that was really tough. Like, I remember in that specific scenario with that employee, like, I think I got a WhatsApp message and it was like 6 a.m. or something. I remember I looked at it when I woke up and it was something along the lines of just like, I'm really sorry I haven't been good enough. I feel like I wanted to be better in this role. And I remember reading it being like, why has she sent this to me? I haven't said anything about her role. Everything was fine. Like, we've not even had a review recently or anything. And I remember then when I look, I read it back like 3-4 times and I was like, it almost seems like a suicide note in a way. It's almost like a thank you. And I think maybe that was me going again to worst case scenario, but that's how my brain processed it. Because I was like, why would you send someone who technically you were reporting to, like, thank you for everything you've done and I'm sorry I haven't been enough, and just leave it there? I was like, you just wouldn't do that. Obviously, if we had like an argument the day before, or if I'd said this wasn't good enough or something, maybe then I'd look at that and be like, oh, okay, maybe she just was really worried about that. But that didn't happen. And I think I then came to you, and then obviously I went to who was sort of leading our HR at the time as well, because he was mental health first aider. I remember saying, like, this to me, this isn't normal behavior, and I've never seen anything like it before, like from her. And I remember that was like okay, we need like a process to figure out how to tackle this, because I don't want to just react and be like, let's have a quick call, because you don't know what mindset someone's in the morning. Like, the last thing they might want is for you to just be ringing them, like leaving 6-7 missed calls. So I was like, I'm not going to reply right now. I'm not going to call. I don't know what's going on right now. I don't know what she's doing, but I need to figure out a plan first. And I guess that's probably where your training came in useful. For scenarios like that, because you can actually think, right, this is the steps we need to take. At the time, I had no idea how do you even deal with this? Like, it's so hard.
Yeah, I know. And then obviously those are two extreme situations we've had. We've had a few like smaller ones with staff, but then it wasn't until I'd be having meals with other agency founders then, and then they'd be like, oh geez, yeah, we've had our own situations as well. And somebody's telling me about how like their member of staff just went offline for like 3 or 4 days and they just couldn't contact them, and they'd sent some like weird messages the time before. So like that's a lot of panic and like stress, and it's a lot of intensity on founders.
Why do you think in agencies especially as well, like, well, actually not why, but do you think it's more intense in agency world, like mental health as a topic and issues with mental health? Do you think it's more intense in agency world because of just naturally the pressure, the amount of work that sometimes is going on, stuff like that? Or do you not really think it is just an agency thing?
I don't know. I don't have enough experience of other places to be aware of it. But like, I think when you see anything around mental health and intensity, it's usually within like finance industries and like lawyers, isn't it? Because of the natural tendencies of their workload, and like they're paid a huge amount to accept that workload. I think a lot of the scenarios that I've been exposed to anyways, it's not specifically usually around the day-to-day job that you've got. It's just more the individual and their circumstances, and a lot of the times that does get protracted onto work then. Whereas I don't think it's like a specific agency thing. But I think just as a founder you should educate yourself as much as possible, talk to other agency founders about it, or even just get a life coach yourself and go through the experience, because that's definitely the best training I've ever had in terms of like helping other members of staff and even friends now. Like, I know for a fact one of my friends, he's got a therapist on like all the time, like he sees them maybe bi-monthly or monthly now. And I know for a fact that he wouldn't have got that therapist if I hadn't told him about my mental health stuff. So like, that's the whole point of doing this podcast, is like, if you share, you help one person, totally worth it.
100%.
And that brings us up to today. So how is your mental health these days?
It's all right now. I mean, yeah, I went through. So I lost someone close to me in November, and I think like up to that point there was a lot going on last year. It was really like just busy. I think then since the employee owned thing, I've not really had like a clear goal of like this is what I want, this is what I think is going to happen. Like as soon as we became employee owned, it was almost like, oh, we've achieved the end goal. So then there was like a weird, just like couple of years. Then that happened in November, and I think that for me was just like again a catalyst where just I noticed myself doing those tendencies that I had at that time in 2019. So it was like I just obsess over random things. I couldn't focus at work. I wasn't like I was snappy. I was reading into everything way too much, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And then it got to Christmas, and I just didn't want to be with anyone for Christmas. Like we went to see my family for Christmas, and I was just sat there like, just get me
You
home.
love Christmas too.
I love Christmas. I'm the biggest Christmas fan. Like literally everyone, it's a running joke. August Christmas songs go on. I love it. But I didn't want to be with anyone. I remember just sitting there like, please just get me home. I didn't feel good physically. I was like, something's wrong with me. Like I'm just not right. And then it got into January, and then I just started to notice these weird things are happening. Like I didn't want to get on a train to London. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it for whatever reason. I had such a panic about just traveling, getting on trains. I had such a panic about just being out in places. And that's never happened before. Like go to a cafe, and I'd kind of say to Jenna, my partner, just be like, I need to get out of here. And she's like, why? And then that just got worse and worse and worse to a point where literally like everything I was doing, I was like, I don't like anything. I'm not enjoying anything. And I think that was like end of Feb-ish time. And I was like, this is just not good. So then I was like, okay, cool. Like I'll try and do like my normal things again. So I was exercising anyway, but I'll try and find my techniques, all this stuff. And then I remember the day vividly. It was the 14th of March. We were supposed to come and record a podcast, me and you.
Yeah.
And I got to the train station. I remember just sitting there. I just looked at the train, and I was like, I would love to throw myself in front of that. I literally said that to myself in my head, and then I was like, no, shut up. No, you don't. And I was like, no, that's not a route I'm going down. But then I remember thinking, the fact that I'm even thinking of this, and then the fact that I was like, I just can't get on the train. I was like, I'm having a panic attack. So I started having an insane panic attack, which I'd had quite a few panic attacks sort of like earlier this year. Again, I'd not really had them to that intensity before. And I called Jenna, and I was like, I can't get on this train. I just cannot do it. I cannot bring myself to get on this train. And she's like, what is it that's stopping you? And I was like, I just can't do it. I can't go anywhere. I can't. And then I literally locked myself in the loo at the train station, just started crying on the phone to her because I was like, what is wrong with me? Like I thought I was better. Like it's been five years. I thought I was better. I was like, what's going on? And then I realized like it's a very different feeling compared to then. Like this was something different. It felt like stronger, just in a different way. And then I was like, yeah. And then eventually I went home, literally just spent the evening at home. And then I was like, I can't live like this. So I called the doctor. I think it was the next morning. Yeah, because so that happened on a Thursday. Friday morning, I called the doctor, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. I think I've got like general anxiety. It's got worse. I explained. He sort of asked like a few things. I said, this is what's happening. He was like, yeah, I'm going to put you on medication straight away. And I was like, okay. There wasn't even like a consultation or anything. It was like, I'm going to put you on it. And in my head, I was like, oh, he probably just says that to everyone. Then that's why there's probably like mass prescriptions. But then I understood his logic because he was like, everything you're saying is so irrational. You need support now. And that goes back to what I was saying. Like I was in crisis point 2.0. And then, yeah, I went to pick up the medication. The first week of that medication was the wildest week I've ever had in my life. I remember I had such weird symptoms. If you've ever been on like sertraline or an antidepressant of any kind, it's like that first couple of weeks, like I had these weird symptoms where I'd clench my jaw all the time. So like I literally sounded like a rabbit, like doing this all the time. And I was down low. I was worse than I was before I even took the medication. So I was in a really dark place. I'd literally be like sat on my sofa staring outside in my garden. I'd literally not blink for like a minute. So like Jenna would like walk in and be like, she'd start crying because she'd be like, I don't know who you are. So it's like this really weird period of like a week and a half, and that fell on the same week as my birthday. So that was my birthday week. And then I'd obviously taken that week off work as well, which was obviously a blessing because there was no way I could even think straight, let alone do any work. And then after a couple of weeks, no, actually I remember then on my birthday, the day after my birthday, we went away for like a night or 2 nights to the Cotswolds. I just remember sat in the car. We got there, and I was like, I feel good. I was like, I'm actually looking forward to today. There's nothing stressing me out. Should we go for a drink? Should we go for lunch? Should we go for a long walk? And I remember just being like, the sky's blue, the grass is green, the air feels crisp. I feel really good. Like, and then it kind of dipped again for a couple of weeks. But then I started doing things I felt really uncomfortable doing before, but I felt like I kind of had the ability to do. So, like, just coming to London, I was like, such a thing that I used to do constantly and not even think about. But then for a few months, it just became so difficult. I was like, let's just ease into it. Let's try once, see how you get on. Let's up that to a point where now, again, I'm fine with it. Let's go to like cafe, let's go pubs, let's go do all these things. And it was totally like fine. And then I got to the point where like now I feel a lot better. And it's been like, what, 3 months now I think I've been on it. And like I went to the FA Cup final last weekend, it was wicked, in a stadium of people. We were walking back to the tube station, they basically shut it, so we were literally cramped like sardines for like a good half an hour, couldn't escape. Didn't even cross my mind, I was having a great time. And I feel like 3 months ago me would have had a fully blown panic attack. And I think like that's like for me just a sign like chemically there was obviously something going on to the point where I needed antidepressants to balance the chemicals. And that's completely changed the way I think and the way I work and the way I see life. I just feel like I can deal with anything, like bring it on and I'll cope with it. And yeah, so now I'm in a much better place. I'm still on it. I'm probably going to be on it for at least 12 months, but I feel like it's just, brought me back to where I want to be essentially.
And then and it's not connected to anything specific. So like you mentioned like crowds quite a few times there and like public travel. It's nothing connected to those, it's just general.
I think what I latched onto is like I did with the health anxiety thing years ago. I think what my mind tends to do is I latch to things and that's my way of projecting anxiety. But like with this, I think it was just a sense of like just a lack of control. So it was like if I got on a train, I'm not in control of that train. I can't escape. Or if
you drove, you'd be okay.
If I drove, I'd be fine. And I think like it's like that. It's like I think the term is agoraphobia. I think that's like the proper term for that kind of anxiety of like a fear of places or of like crowds or stuff like that. And I'd never had that before. Like me and you have gone to so many football matches. Like I've gone to so many concerts. Like I love doing things with people. I'm such a people person. Like as much as I like time on my own, I love being around people. So for this to happen, I knew like this isn't just like grief. Like yeah, I've lost someone, but they weren't like they lived in Croatia and I saw them sporadically. Like, yeah, I love them and it doesn't take that away, but this isn't the cause of it. Something else is going on and this was constant. And I think now I've just realized that some people are just like predisposed genetically to that. Like my granddad was a heavy alcoholic and that was triggered by his depression. My mum was on antidepressants in her 30s after they moved to England when they fled the Croatia war. She took them and they said they changed her life. And that was one of the reasons why I called the doctor. And it almost makes me think like, are some people just predisposed to be more anxious, more depressive types? And then things in life happen and some people just learn to deal with them and some people don't. And you just have to find what works for you. So
the education part, I think that was when I was going through my stuff, is like something anxiety in the back of your mind around, is this hereditary? And is there anything you can actually do about it? So that's what I was trying to figure out and get out of the therapist. Because like, yeah, obviously my uncle killed himself and then my father's father did too. So my grandfather. So then if you're in a bad headspace, that stuff starts worrying. But I mean, what I found out was it's not, that kind of stuff isn't hereditary. It's the environment that you're in. So like, if I was exposed to them as individuals and I maybe like lived with them or like was brought up directly with them, all of their negative thoughts or like the way that they lived life has a much bigger impact on yourself rather than hereditary when it comes to like mental health and suicide.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I can see both sides, but then part of me is like, if I take a medication that is supposed to increase levels of a hormone or a chemical in my brain and that has helped me, there must be something there that's like physical, if that makes sense. It's not just my like surroundings or my like the way I was brought up or the way I think or work or like day-to-day life stresses. This is something inside of you that then either gets worse because of the way you live, so like the whole nature nurture thing, or it gets better. And like some people just find ways to deal with it. And I mean, obviously like it crosses my mind, like, was this always going to be, that's just the way I am. And because of the route I chose in life, I wanted to run a business, I wanted to live a high stress life, I want all of this because I love it, but it's because I wanted that and because I'm an anxious type, just a bad combination which led to this. Perhaps maybe if I went for a different route in life, like a more stable job, something, like, you never know what happens, like you never know, like, would that marry up with my genetic or DNA in my brain better? Who knows? And it was just a bad cocktail of stuff I don't really know, and then you just have to figure out how to deal with it, perhaps. But I feel a much better place now, and obviously the next test will be when I go off of that medication, which I plan to do. But I feel like now I'm off it, I'm relaxed, I'm calm, I can actually think, like, how can I do better in the future? Like, how can I actually process things? What do I want to do in my day-to-day life? Like, how do I want to structure my days to build better habits so I don't have to rely on this in the future? Which is no shame on if I have to in the future, but I want to try it without, just to kind of see how I get on.
Interesting. I think the kind of learned about, I was aware of in that course, was something around the human brain where, like you said about your grandmother dying, it's like, as humans, we're quite bad at, like, we're not aware of stuff that happened 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago that impacts us today. Like, our brain just doesn't work that way and it can't connect it. So then when some stuff does happen and you're worried, or like there's issues, like you always search, like, well, what happened yesterday or last week? Like, what's happening in my life right now that's causing this? Whereas the reality is it could have been years ago, something you haven't processed that just is stuck there. And that's why you do therapy, is to try and get that out.
No, I agree. And obviously last year, I think work-wise, I did find quite stressful. There were a lot of things that happened that were like firsts for us and sort of like difficult challenges. And I wonder if just like, it was a combination of so many things. And then eventually I was like, snap, when this thing happened in November. Obviously your brain doesn't go to like what happened in February or March that might have led to this. Your brain goes to, why can't I just be okay? Why can't I be normal? Why can't I enjoy Christmas with all this happiness going on around me? Instead, I'm a miserable git. Like, you think of the now, but I totally agree, yeah.
Yeah, you reminded me as well. So yeah, after I had my stuff, then when you start getting better, like, again, I was just off and didn't really know why, and then listened to this random podcast. I couldn't find it now if you asked for me, but it's something around happiness anxiety. So now if you're feeling better and you're like, things are good, then an anxiety forms of like, well, what if I lose this, and what if I go back, and like, well, am I specifically doing something right now that's causing this, which I will stop doing? And then once I've read about that, I was like, wow, it's just crazy, isn't it? It's just, you have to have such awareness of what's going on in yourself. And I mean, that's why a journal is just trying to figure that stuff out, because you just don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was like a big trigger, because like we had so much good, like we had such a growing business, we were successful people, like people look at us in the industry and I feel like they knew, it's not like an imposter syndrome, but you almost get to a point where like, I don't want to lose this now. It's like when you're in the building phase, it's like, we're just building, and if something fucks up, it happens, we'll move on. But then once it's built, you're a bit like, I can't lose this now, because I've developed a way of life around it. It's like my baby. And I think that then triggered like the whole just constant anxiety over a number of years for me, where I just couldn't really manage it well, where it was like the fear of losing it, or the fear of being like, well, we've built something amazing, what if it now fails tomorrow, and then we're actually seen as failures? Like, I'd lose that feeling of like, wow, I'm proud to be a business owner. I think I latched onto that so much, and then obviously until I realized like it's just not a way to live. Like, you can't fear what might happen, you just have to be proud of the fact you've even done it to this point.
Yeah,
but I think that's natural anyway.
There's definitely something there around like the general happiness of like expectation of like, if you told what yourself 10 years ago of what you achieved now, it's beyond whatever you wanted, but then you're still in life, and it's just like, people think that you grow a business or you have a family or you do all of these things, and it's just going to be a magic pill to like cure everything. And that's when you hear about like footballers, isn't it, and sports stars, where like they come out with their mental health issues, and then you've got some people then that like world's smallest violin, or just being like, how can you be unhappy when you've got everything that people deem to be successful and happiness, which is like, yeah, being famous, having all the money in the world that these footballers do, but still like, you still have life challenges that cause mental health issues. Like,
things don't make you happy.
No.
I think it's like, things give you the ability to make things easier in life, absolutely, but do they make you happier? No. Like, to be happy, it's like it's just how you react to things, which is your happiness. It's like a great example could be like someone could message me now and be like, hi, and I could either look at that and be like, God, that's rude. I've started the conversation off already on a negative, so my way of going back to them might already be like, what do you need? Or I could just read that as, oh, that's a nice message. Hey, what do you need? It's all about perception. I feel like that's perspective, sorry. And I feel like that for me is like been such a learning over the years. It's like how I respond to something will dictate if I'm happy or not. And I'm not going to let that be controlled by something that's happened outside or someone else. Or it's like, if I respond to this negatively, that's on me and I will be unhappy with that. But if I decide to be like, yeah, okay, this wasn't the nicest thing, or I could read into this a bit more, but actually I'm not going to, I'm going to look at it this way. You just start to develop your own kind of like happy processes in your brain where you're like, actually, I'll try and start defaulting to positive rather than negative, which I think I was always leaning towards more.
Yeah, I think some people just have a natural awareness or development of like what makes them happy, whereas others just don't, and that's what therapy is meant to do, is like help you find your coping mechanisms and like help you to figure out what you truly do enjoy and are happy with doing day to day, because some people just can't figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got at least 3 books that helped me during my time that I'll link wherever this goes, and also wrote a blog about stuff as well, so we can link to that as well.
Nice. And we've also got like obviously life coaches and therapists who we have tried and tested, so if you want like any sort of recommendations or you just want like a chat or anything like that, just reach out to both Sam and I. We're more than happy to have this conversation because I think it's an important one for founders especially, but also for any kind of leader in the industry. Thank you for listening. It was a long one. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. Probably like 2-3 cups of tea more than anything. But yeah, please make sure to leave us a review, subscribe if you can so you're notified for the next episode, and we will see you at the next one.